introduce yourself, and then we'll move to Sheena and then Carolina.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm streaming from Houston, Texas. This is Dr. Nurse Paul, but you can call me Paul. I'm the CEO of Aspire RN. I also do my own show in my own page, Dr. Nurse Paul Show. And today we're going to feature some of our passers and success heroes. We're going to hear their inspiring stories. But mainly, I'm here as one of the panel along with Holly to talk about next generation NCLEX and how it impacts our students, our nurses, in as far as passing and succeeding in their NCLEX exam.
Thank you, Paul. Sheena, can you introduce yourself for us?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Sheena Lynn Formon. I am married with 2 children. I'm currently working in a private hospital here in our province. And I was worked before in Saudi Arabia for almost 6 years as OPD nurse.
Thank you, Sheena, for being with us today. Carolina, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, I'm Carolina. I'm from Brazil. I'm a nurse here for since 2011. I worked in a private hospital in the surgical center in the labor delivery. And now I started to realize my dream to move to United States when I passed in the NCLEX.
Congratulations, Carolina. We're excited to have you here. Thanks for signing on from Brazil. We'll probably have some Brazil nurses either watching this while we're live or maybe in the future. So we're excited that you're able to be with us today. And Marshelle, where are you signing on from? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Marshelle Narciso. I live here in the northern part of the Philippines. It's called Isabela. So I'm already married and I have a 4-year-old daughter. I'm working in a private hospital here in the province.
Okay,
And
thank you so much. So I like the name of your town. Is it Isabella? That's very pretty. We're glad that we have people from all over the world who are eager to learn about next gen NCLEX and want to hear the things that you guys have to share because you're recent passers of this new format of exam and some of the different question styles. And so I do want to talk just a moment about our success path for the Connetics program. So we have here a slide that may be familiar to some of you. And basically, when we talk about the journey from the very beginning of, I'm interested in coming to the U.S. to arrival in the U.S. and building a life and a career here, there are quite a few steps that you will go through. And Connetics USA and AM International are certainly eager to guide nurses through this process and work with them to find great matches for the hospitals and facilities they may want to go to work for. But there's a lot of boxes to check to be able to make that dream a reality. And so that is where we come in. We obviously have helped a lot of nurses through the NCLEX part of the process. And those of you who are here with us today, you have been part of that pre-NCLEX program that Connetics offers. And Paul, with his Aspire program, is one of our partners as well. And we do also partner with IPASS for NCLEX reviews. And we've seen great success overall with our nurses who are doing the next gen NCLEX. It's really exciting because up to March 31st, everybody was kind of like, we don't know how this is going to work. And now we're 2 months into it, or a little more, and we're able to kind of see how everything is coming into play, and hearing back from our nurses, both the people who've been successful and those who weren't able to. And we want to share some of that today with you. So now that we've done our introductions, I want to tell you that while you've got that NCLEX success path, the first step checked off with NCLEX, we are here to guide you through the rest of the process as well. Before we get too deep into your experiences, I do want to share a little bit about next gen and some of the differences. So for those of you who are joining us, which I see Blessing says she's from Nigeria, Odette from Cameroon, Walter from Angola, and Vengai from Zimbabwe, Vani from the Philippines. So all over the world. Before we get to that, the stories, I want to talk just a moment about Next Gen NCLEX. So we have some slides that will pop up here on the screen while we talk. But Paul, will you just give us sort of a quick rundown of what changed with Next Gen NCLEX starting on April 1st?
All right, so the next gen NCLEX, we've seen changes to the test items. So definitely we have new test items. Particularly, everybody's familiar with the case study setup, but individual test items, we have seen changes such as highlighting texts or drag and drop to complete a sentence. We have close where you click a drop box and you see the answers there. We have bow tie, which looks like a little butterfly or a bow tie where you complete all five boxes asking you the competencies for the clinical judgment. And we have a couple more like the SATAs are now longer. We call it extended multiple response. We have tables or grids and a couple more stuff. There are actually 14 subtypes of different test items, which I have discussed in my show as well. But also, we've also seen changes to the scoring system. With the next gen NCLEX setup, we are now doing partial scoring versus the old generation where it's all or nothing scoring format where you only get 1 point. If there's anything that you miss in one of the questions, then you get 0 point. Now we get partial scores, which actually help our students because partial scores would give you a certain number of scores versus getting zero. So that's a plus for most of our students who are doing the next gen NCLEX. And then on the screen, we see the changes to the test plan. There is a 2% deduction to the management of care, but there is also an increase of 1% on both safety and infection control and pharmacology questions. And then the test item changes too, like the minimum items is now 85 items versus 75 in the past, and the maximum is 150 items versus 145 items in the past. So those are the changes.
Awesome. And I'll mention one more, and just in case I didn't hear it from you,
You're
maybe
right.
you said it,
Yeah,
but
I might have
the
forgotten
lab
to.
ranges, the lab
Yeah,
range
yeah,
normal values are provided. So little less guesswork for those of you who go blank when you're sitting trying to remember what's normal and abnormal.
yeah.
You'll have a little more information there, which is kind of you can take a breath and
Right.
not have to feel like your brain is blank on those. So in all, what trends, Paul, are we seeing? And you and I can probably both talk about this. Actually, before we do that, I see Alicia has been able to join us. Hi, Alicia. Thanks for being
Hi.
on today. Can you introduce yourself really quickly and tell us where you're signing in from?
Oh, I'm Alicia signing in.
Alicia, can you tell us where you're logging on from, where your location is, like what country, and a little bit about yourself? Hmm.
I'm Alicia Rice. I'm logging in from Guyana. I'm a nurse since 2015 and I recently passed the NCLEX examination thanks to Sir Paul.
Yes. So thank you, Alicia. We have a very diverse group on our call today, which excites
Right.
me because
Right.
we have so many nurses from all over the world who may be able to identify with you based on your clinical background, your cultural background. And so it's nice to have such a great group represented here today. So the trends, Paul, going back to that, what trends are you seeing with your nurses who are going through your program as far as their outcomes, some of the things that they're maybe giving you in feedback as they move through to take the exam and in most cases pass? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So in most of the feedbacks that I got was students are getting, I don't know, our nurses here in front of us right now could tell me and verify with me, but most of them were able to get at least five or between 5 to 7 case studies in the entirety of the exam. Now, I have a mixed group of students who finished minimum items and some of them finished maximum items. But what I've seen in our performances, all students that we've recommended to take the exam have all passed the NCLEX from April and May batches as far as the scholarship is concerned. And that's because we also in our program we also train them to do case studies. We do what we have what we call next gen NCLEX master classes, where I go to the class every weekend with our students to kind of train them. But aside from case studies, certain students would also get individual or stand-alone next-gen format questions, but majority of the questions are still in the old format, which is the multiple choice. And again, majority of them are still are about prioritization or still about prioritization. So while you guys are transitioning to next-gen NCLEX, next-gen format, very important, and this is what I always tell my students, to master your content, because majority of the questions are still going to be in the prioritization format, where you will have to really use your critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to go around and ask the group of Carolina, Sheena, and then Marshali. How many case study questions did you get? Those 6-part case studies we were a little nervous about. So how many did you get on your exam this time?
In my exam, I had 4.
4. So Carolina, you had 4. And Marshali?
For me, I had 5.
Okay. And Sheena?
I think 5 to 7. So many NGN
It's like,
questions.
yeah, it's kind of a blur sometimes. After you walk out of there, you go, what happened? So okay, so that's about what we thought when we talk to nurses who've passed and those who haven't made it. We do hear often that they're getting more than the 3 that was kind of rumored. Everybody's going to get 3, and so we know that some of those questions may not be scored,
Right.
Which is part of the process. That's normal for NCLEX anyway. But that's what we're really kind of looking at, is making sure people are aware to be prepared for more than 3 of those 6-part case study questions. So I'm going to slip a question in here. And I think I'll have Sheena answer this one. So Sheena, as far as the case studies went, did you find that you liked the case studies better than the standalone format, or did you prefer the standalone?
No, for me, I must say I'm enjoying answering the NGN questions because there is choices already, like a bow tie questions, and then the matrix multiple choice, because you will not get 0 on this, because for example you will select 5 answers, and you will just select only sure answer you have. For me, I think that the tips I used during my exam.
That's good. Yeah. And your response is kind of what I expected to hear as well. So most nurses, we want to use that nurse brain and get that clinical picture. And the next gen NCLEX questions that are case studies kind of build that story for you, as opposed to kind of trying to figure out what is the story with 2 lines on a practice question or on the real thing. And it makes us want to add, because we've seen these patients in some cases before. Okay. So Carolina, can you and Marshali and Alicia, we'll go in that order, tell us one thing that surprised you on this exam, the next gen NCLEX? Just one.
For me, is the quality of the new questions.
Okay. The quality of the new questions was a better experience than you expected, or tougher?
Yes, it's a better experience before.
Yes, and I didn't mention it earlier. We were going to get into that, but I'll just give you a hint. Carolina had attempted the previous NCLEX format more than once. Carolina, do you want to tell us about your previous attempts and compared to Next Gen? You've done it a total of how many times?
I done 3 times after the new generation. In my last chance, I say I will wait for the new generation of NCLEX try again. And then when I try, I pass it.
Yay!
Yay,
So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Yeah.
for those of
Yes, I
you
will.
who,
I will do. I will done in the United States the last chance now.
Wow,
Mhm.
nice, nice.
So this was it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
after, I think that's very inspiring, Carolina, to know that you had tried it with the previous version multiple times. You didn't give up. So kudos to you. And you were successful with the new format as well, which some people, they're very nervous. They don't know whether they're going to like it or not. So I think that gives people a lot of hope to know that, number one, don't give up. You will get there. And number two, this next gen is probably not as scary as some people may be finding it, even if they tested on the previous attempt with the older format. So kudos. Marcelli, one thing that surprised you on the next gen NCLEX.
Same thing. It's the type of questions, you know. I got used to answering just multiple questions, but in the NGN we answered a lot of type of questions, right? Like highlighting or even bow ties and everything. So that one surprised me. But for me, it's better. I think. I like the NGN question rather than the old one.
Okay. So again, more hope for those of you who are facing the next gen. And Alicia, can you tell us one thing that surprised you about next gen?
Well, for me, nothing surprised me because I was keep practicing the U world and I was attending circle classes. So when I get to the exam, I was like, "This is U world questions I'm answering." So it nothing surprises me there. It was
Okay.
it added challenges in terms of some questions, but it was good.
She came in prepared.
She did. So that's good to not feel
Yeah.
surprised. You can kind of take a deep breath during the exam and go, okay, I can do this. And for the rest of you ladies, did you also use the U World practice questions for because I know Alicia just mentioned that she did use them and found them helpful. Did you also use them or did you use something different?
I use
Carolina?
UWorld too.
Oh, sorry. Marcelli, go ahead.
Yes, I use UWorld too, and question banks from Aspire RN too.
Very good. Sheena?
Yes, yes. I
You
also
did.
added from your word.
And Carolina, next gen.
Um, should try to then more questions to the new generation.
hmm Did you program for the next gen practice questions or no?
Yes, the only for 1 month.
Okay, so a short time, and we've had other nurses who've passed that have also not used UWorld for several months, but just for a tight period of time. Paul,
Right,
what's your recommendation on using question banks like UWorld for
right.
that final prep?
So with our Aspire RN students, our students right here are from Aspire RN, right? So what we do is we have our own question bank that's about 4,000 questions, and then towards the
Mhm.
end, when they're about 1 month away to the exam, that's when we give out their UWorlds. So UWorld is very helpful in practicing what they already know, like strengthening those neural pathways is what I call your memory pathways. But again, question banks are just that, question banks, right? UWorld is very good, but it will not help you if your content is shaky, especially in the setting of next gen NCLEX where you are being tested for clinical judgment. It is very important that you have very good foundation with your contents. So with the Aspire RN program, the progression is you master your contents first in the didactics phase is what we do, and then you move to the neural phase where we build your test taking strategies. We teach you next gen NCLEX concepts. We show you case studies and teach you how to attack those case studies. But by that time, you would have expected that your content is already good because honestly, case studies are going to be easier for you if your content is good. So while UWorld help UWorld helps students that have very good foundation with their content or nursing core topics. If they're performing good with those topics, because at the end of the day, once you start answering those questions, if you do not have an idea of what the question is asking about, then you're still not gonna get a good score. And that is the same thing with NCLEX. We've seen students who fail the NCLEX and they get to my desk. I study their candidate report and I ask them what happened during your NCLEX. The problem was not how they answered the question. The problem was they do not know what the question was asking because the content was what was missing. So question banks are good, but make sure that your content is solid. You have good foundation with your nursing content before you move on to question banks. That's why with Aspire RN, UWorld is usually the last 30-day push. Like, okay, you're gonna do in the last 30, 40, 50 days is to just answer question banks. But by that time, you would have gained enough knowledge or competencies already to pass the NCLEX.
Right. So you're polishing, you're taking that content that you've established in your mind, and now you're having to apply it and polish your testing skills. And
Right.
if you're busy trying to learn content when you're supposed to be polishing your testing skills, you get to the NCLEX and you might have the content, but you won't have the testing skills.
Right.
So you need the whole picture, and that's why a structured program is also very useful. Carolina, I want to go back to you for just a minute. Did you use a structured program for your previous attempts, or yeah, so you still found it challenging? What made the biggest difference for you on this last attempt?
It's not to have a big difference because we have the knowledge. I study a lot of after, and now in the next generation, I think I know the knowledge. Now I need to put in the questions and to train to do a lot of questions to try the new structure of the new generation and pray a lot too when I done the exam. It's not so to done anything so different than the first attempt. Only to put my knowledge in the questions.
Very good. So to some degree, I think we can say that this style of exam was a better fit for you. And it sounds like for some of our other nurses here too. Sheena, I want to go to you for just a minute. What was one thing that you found really helpful during your prep for the exam? Just share one item that you're like, nurses need to know this.
Well, for me, the master class of Sir Paul, the NGN, you need to attend the live classes as well as you, as much as possible, you participate because the more you participate in the class, the more it will retain the topic in your review. So that's the one helpful thing. Before I use the UWorld Q bank in the ancient questions.
Okay, yeah, that's great advice. And I think it's something that not every nurse necessarily is aware of how important. You're going to study so much. How do we cement it so that interaction in live lectures can be extremely valuable? Alicia, what about you? What's one thing that you found really helpful during your review that you would want other nurses to know?
Attending the live classes, even if you don't get to attend it, you follow up and keep reading and answering questions.
Great advice.
But
So
at
I
the
think
end of it, content is important.
You and Sheena have a very similar view then of those live lectures. And the additional thing you mentioned is if you couldn't be there, go back and look at them, which is also, that's really important. Marshelle, what would you say is one thing that nurses should know and do when they're preparing for next gen?
I think it's the answering of questions, and my favorite part was the NGN masterclass of Sir Paul. That's where I actually got familiarized of the questions, and it became my favorite. So I just focused on it, and that's why maybe because it became easier for me when when I already on the exam.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like, all of you really dove into all of the resources that you had available to you with the program. And that's really important. I think some nurses like a little less pressure and a little less interaction with somebody kind of going, hey, you need to do this or look at this or work on this. And I think that what we've seen, and Paul, you can maybe confirm this, is when we have nurses during next gen who have not been successful, oftentimes these things that you're sharing that were helpful are the things that we're lacking. So a lack of accountability, a lack of structured review, a lack of maybe knowing that content and having somebody kind of say, you don't know the content yet, let's wait and don't rush into doing Q banks until you've mastered this. So even though the pass rates have been good for the groups that we have, and Paul, from what I hear from you as well, you have the odds in your favor when you have used a more structured program, when you have worked through the content as we've talked about, and brought all of that together, interactions or watching live lectures, and you can take notes and kind of go back to your books or content review where you're hearing things that maybe you're not as comfortable with. Paul, would you say that like, I know we've had some students who have only partially completed a course.
Right.
So
Yeah, we have mentioned a structured program multiple times, but that is actually very important. The reason why, for example, with me with Aspire RN, I did not just create the program out of nothing. It was evidence based. It was also purely not purely. I'm sorry, but it was also factor into it anecdotal in my experience in 16 years as an NCLEX instructor. If you look at the pass rates of say internationally educated nurses that were educated outside US, we consistently see that the scores are between 43% to 48% in the last 5 or 10 years. In fact, last year was one of the lowest. It was 43% pass rates. And then when I reviewed the data earlier this year for the first quarter of the year, there were 21,000 international graduates that took the NCLEX, whereas last year, same time frame, was only 6,000. 21,000 took the NCLEX, 39% passed. 61% failed the NCLEX. So the question is, where are these 12,000 nurses going to, right? So they failed the NCLEX. The main reason why we are getting low scores for international graduate nurses is not because our nurses are not smart enough like our US graduate nurses, right? It's because of the differences in educational competencies and practice. So that's what we're doing in Aspire Art. We're trying to bridge that gap to make sure that nurses are actually ready before they take the NCLEX. With the next gen NCLEX, it posed another challenge because there's going to be a change in the competencies that we need to check to make sure that the students will pass the NCLEX, and that is the clinical judgment. Now, the advantage with our international graduate nurses are most of them have experiences, so the critical thinking is there. It's just a matter of what Carolina said, is applying it to the question. Sometimes nurses underestimate what they know, but when they actually move into my neural phase after they do their didactics phase where they do their contents and master the contents, they actually know a lot. But in the setting of a question, it just gets confusing, especially when you're trying to understand a case study with 1,000 words, with a whole screen filled with a case. But with good strategy, with good preparation, with frequent exposure to these types of materials, the students get more comfortable and more comfortable the more that they do it. So that's what we're trying to do with our program. We're not only building their content, we're also teaching them test taking strategy and kind of like desensitizing them to the scare about next gen NCLEX. That way, like what Alicia said earlier, when she faced the NCLEX, she said, it's just another Euro quiz that I'm gonna do, because she already came prepared. She was already primed holistically, not only with cognitive side, but also her skills and her attitude toward the exam are also have been improved with the program. So that's what we're trying to do with Aspire. And we want to make sure that by the time they face the NCLEX, they're fully ready. But then again, structured review program is very important for international graduate nurses because this is the only way that you can patch those gaps that you didn't learn from your nursing school from whichever country you took your nursing classes.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. So, the number of candidates that we've seen, I think, to this point gives us a good pattern that we can look at. And unfortunately, what we do see is partial focus on those things will be to your detriment. So it's extremely important. Use what we're sharing here today to think about how you're going to prepare in the future. If you're midway through your prep, don't stop, don't slow down, keep going and stick with the plan, as it were. So I see that Cho is joining us from Cameroon, and Bayor is watching from Ghana. Awesome. And then I do have a comment in the chat, just in case you're interested. If you would like to apply to Connetics, you can go to ConneticsUSA.com/apply and submit an application to us. And we'll be happy to look at whether we can make a match for you with one of our clients. If you're looking at taking the NCLEX either as a first time or even as a retest, there is some great information on our website as well for that. So we've pasted the link into the comments section. You can go ahead and grab that and use that. As Paul mentioned, he has done some other videos, both for Connetics under our Connetics College. So we have lots of videos that he's partnered with us on and his own website. So lots of resources out there. Evans is signing on from Kenya. Arlene is on from state of Kuwait, and Ajana is joining us from Ghana. So thank you so much to all of you for being with us today. All right, so let's talk for just another moment. I just got to get back on track here. Let's see. So who in the group, we know that Carlina, you had some previous attempts on NCLEX, but Marshali, was this your first attempt? Sheena, was it your first attempt at NCLEX?
Yes.
Yes.
So for both of you, this was totally fresh. You couldn't rely on thousands of nurses who've done these question styles before. You had to sort of face it from the very beginning. So what did you do for your preparation? Maybe something you haven't shared yet, knowing that you were going to sit next gen before a lot of other people had had experience with it. Sheena, did you do anything, different, or just say it's NCLEX? I just have to do the usual.
Maybe the usual. I read already the Saunders before I enter the Connetics. But for the NGN, I only founded with the Aspire reviewers like Sir Paul, and I really found that the foundation of my review is with that NGN master classes. So it helps me a lot, and then more question and answers and the rationales you need uh, to read all over again like that. So it really helps me.
Great. Good advice. And Marshali, anything that you did different, knowing, oh my goodness, next gen is coming and I'm one of the first ones?
Well, it got me nervous. Actually, I was trying to take the exam before April. I want to take the exam March. I was like, well, I have to take. I mean, the NGN scares me, but God led me to, it all was fully booked. I couldn't take the exam on March. So I think God led me to take the exam on NGN. So I think NGN was for me. That's why the preparation I took was only just attending live classes of Dr. Paul during NGN master classes, and also answering questions from the UWorld. UWorld helped me a lot to be familiarized with the questions. And then I prayed a lot, of course. So I think that really helped me to prepare for the exam.
So I think that the lesson in this is that we want others to know you don't have to be afraid. You just have to be prepared. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so if you are doing sprints to prepare, which I sometimes see this, Paul, I'm sure you do too. People are like sprinting away for a little while and then they stop. They never get to the point of really doing that true marathon prep.
Right.
And so when it comes time to actually run that race, do the NCLEX, the techniques that they've used aren't enough. And unfortunately, sometimes then they have to go try again, but it's also always a learning experience. So even when you don't make it, don't give up hope. As Carolina has clearly shown, it's worth having that belief in yourself and continuing to set those goals. And I can appreciate that. It can be very demoralizing if you don't make it. It's not a fun feeling. We fully acknowledge that. But sometimes what you learn from that experience is, get up, take away, okay, I know I didn't do well on this. I know I should have, could have, would have. And if you're working with a review company, you can also ask, can you give me some advice? And they can debrief with you and kind of give you some ideas based on your experience with that exam and what they think from your candidate performance report. So just keep pushing. I do want to talk for just a minute, Paul. What's the typical timeline for a retester to try and target to test again? Should they give it another year? Should they give it a month? Well, they can't give it a month. They need to give it a little more than that. But
Right.
what do you recommend as someone who's been working in this space for a long time?
Well, definitely not a year. I think that momentum also plays a factor. If you've been running the marathon for too long, you get fatigued too. So here's the thing. I want to see their performance report, and what I look, what I try to find out is what was their performance during their last exam. If I see that majority 6 out of 8 or all 8 have below passing standard, which means the student failed, really failed, then the student would want to start with building their contents, right? So that would put them about 3-4 months into preparation. But some of them are actually borderline performers. They might have taken the maximum items, 150 items, and we see 1 or 2 below pass standards, a couple of near passing standards, and 1 or 2 above passing standards. This tells me that the student has the content there. What the student lacks is test taking strategy or more practice questions. Then I say, you know what? You just finish your question banks and we'll see what your predictor exam would say, right? So it really depends on the individual score sheets that they would get. They would get a performance report. If I see near pass standards and above pass standards there, then that tells me the student has a good content. At least we have some foundation there that we can build on as we do test taking strategies. But if it's like below pass standards all the way or majority are below pass standards, then that tells me the student would go back to scratch and work their way up to build that foundation before they can answer practice questions. So timeline that we're looking at for low performers, I'm sorry about the word, but students who actually failed because they failed. And that's many factors. Again, the student might not be actually prepared because they're going through something, or instead of doing the marathon, they run towards the end and they failed miserably because they didn't prepare, right? um, then I say 4 months, 6 months. But if the student already has good performance and the cause of the failure to the NCLEX was not the content, but just test anxiety or something else, but the content is there based on the performance report, then I'd say 2 months would be enough.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. I think the thing that we find a lot of times, at least when I speak with nurses who haven't made it on an attempt, is when they've gotten more questions, they thought that meant they failed miserably.
Right.
And I'm like, it's actually the opposite. So if the questions stop at that 85 number, whatever the result is, it's solid.
Right.
You either knew your stuff and you had your testing skills, or you didn't know what you needed to know, most likely, or
Right.
you had a really bad anxiety performance. And so it's extremely statistically obvious that you're not prepared to be
Right.
successful.
And may I add something else
Mhm.
because you mentioned the maximum items and people get scared with that. I honestly tell my students during my final coaching, I'm an ER nurse and this is always my mentality going into work. You always prepare for the worst but expect for the best. There is a sense of everybody's trying to compete to get to the minimum items and finish at the minimum items, which is 85, which is for me is a wrong motivation for students. I
Mhm.
think what I always tell the students, you always prepare with your NCLEX thinking that you will reach 150 items. That way, if you finish at 85, well, then and good, you finished early. But if you don't finish at 85 and you're expecting yourself to finish at 85, and I've seen this with high performing students, then they develop anxiety and they proceed towards 150 and they still fail, even though
Mhm.
they were performing good during their review classes. So always
Mhm.
prepare yourself as though you were taking 150 full items. But then again, if you finish at 85, it doesn't also tell us if you pass or
Guaranteed.
fail, right?
Right.
Well, what I'll do is if you're my student, I'll check your predictor exam with me, and maybe I can get an idea if you will pass or fail, right? But
Mhm.
that's how I deal with students. But yeah, don't expect that you will finish 85 because a lot of students are like, okay, I'm gonna finish 85, but then they don't finish 85 and they get very bad anxiety after that and they lose their focus after that. So I don't want that to happen to you guys.
Right. Every question you get is an opportunity,
Right.
whether that's 85, 87, 96, whatever, it's an opportunity.
Right.
So don't waste it and don't let that, cause your mental focus to be shifted away
Mhm.
from what's most important.
Right.
And believe in yourself, take the full opportunity. Don't let it kind of mess with your head, if it were. Um, all right. So let's see. Marsheli and Sheena. How did you manage your anxiety? So Marsheli, were you stressed during the exam? Were you anxious? What did you do?
Uh, well, actually, before the exam, I was very, very, very anxious because Dr. Nurse Paul knows my scores during my assessments. I always get below the standard scores. So I actually got worried. But 2 weeks before the exam, I focus a lot on my content mastery so that I can master all the cases, especially for the NGN questions. And then, but during the exam, I wasn't really anxious at all. I don't know, maybe because I already have prepared enough, and or I have already prayed enough. So while answering the questions, I just focus on what was being asked for, and then when I reached the item 85, I was expecting the computer to shut down, but it didn't. So I did experience what Dr. Nurse Paul said. So that's the time I went very anxious. So after the 85 question, I went very anxious. Like, oh my God, I knew all my friends who took the NGN before stopped at 85, but why not me? So during that time, my knees were shaking. I just answered all the question all the way to 150. So I reached the 150 items. With all those SATAs, I got five case studies, five bow ties, and a lot of SATA questions. I think 19 or 20 SATA questions. So it was really hard, and I didn't even take a break. So the tips that I can share is that whenever your anxiety attacks, you just have to pray, be still. You have to talk to God and let Him take away your anxiety. You just say, "Dear God, my heart is full of doubt right now, but I'm choosing to trust you. I know you can take my worries, and I believe that you're gonna work it out." So after that, you're just gonna have to be still and trust God, and just continue answering the question. Focus on what was being asked for.
Mhm. So it's awesome to hear when someone's faith is able to help them feel a sense of calm and security. And I'm glad that you have that. And I hear some other good things too, like it sounds like almost take it one at a time and don't let it get to you. So stay focused. And I think I've heard almost everyone say prayer. Every time I do this show, it's like, oh yes, I was praying. So the other thing that I wonder is, or I guess what I heard that is important is that by preparing, you can reduce your anxiety. So by walking into the exam, knowing that you did what you needed to do, you can feel more secure and in control and rely on that. Carolina, I think I've already asked you, what was different for your previous attempts with the old format and the new. But is there, when you step back and you look at it, is there something that, with Next Gen coming, did you change your approach at all?
No, I'm not so anxious with the new generation. When I done the first attempt and I done the questions in the end of the exam, and for me, I say, oh, I think it's not so easier than the last generation of the NCLEX. I think it's the easier because when you look for the question, you're thinking about the patient of the case, and you imagine what will be happen, and not to know to if I have a doubts, I look for the question, look for the sentence. Oh, no, this is possible. No, this is not possible for this question, and I'm focused in the new generation. I'm focused and done this, and yeah, and so calm, and I'm done so calm this attempt. But when the end of this exam, my husband stay waiting for me, and he says, honey, I think you didn't pass. Your face is so bad.
Just what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I think when we walk out and we feel just exhausted after that exam, and you start to think about it and you go, oh, there's just no way. And then you get a result that you get very happy with. So I'm glad it was great news this time, but it is an exhausting experience. And our family and loved ones, they see that in our faces, and they hear that in our voices, I think, if we're able to speak at the end of it. Paul, there's a question that came in from Arlene. She says she's going to sit the exam on June 8th. How best to use the remaining days before the test? So it's June 2nd. She's got like a little less than a week left. What would you do?
Okay, tough call. But if you still have a couple of days left, you can try some more practice questions. But I usually tell my students to stop answering questions 2 to 3 days before the exam, because you want to give like a little rest to your neurons so you can reserve that energy towards the exam. You also want to relieve your anxiety as much as people are in denial. Whenever you take an exam, and everybody feels this, we go through a certain level of anxiety, and we want to keep that anxiety very low, at a low level. If you fail to recognize that, it might hurt you during the actual NCLEX. And I've taught a lot of students over the years, and there are students that had bad anxiety during the exam. So what I want you to do is, in the 2 to 3 days preceding the exam date, what you want to do is to just relax. I tell my students to, if you like walking, go around, walk in the park, or call your friends and FaceTime your family. Stop talking about the exam. Stop talking about the NCLEX. Nothing nursing related, but just be in the state of calmness, like what Marcelli said earlier. Because if you try to answer more questions a day or two before the exam, it's not going to help you. It's just going to make you more anxious to think, oh, I still don't know a lot. Oh, no, I should know this by now, but I don't, right? There will always be that feeling that you don't know everything. And that is actually true for everybody, even myself. When I took my NCLEX or my nurse practitioner boards, you would feel that way, and you have to accept that. And you have to be in a state of peace to think that you've already done your best at that point, that you're already prepared for this for months, and you are ready. All right. But in the next couple of days, try to answer questions, I guess, in 1 or 2 or 3 days from now. But 3 days before the boards, or your NCLEX, do not answer any question at all. Just do relaxation activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely don't want to walk into the exam with your anxiety levels
Right.
at their highest point they've ever been.
Right.
That will not be helpful. Okay. Evans, I do see your comment that you're looking for some communication from our ConneticsUSA team, and we will make sure to get back with you as quickly as we can. So thank you for letting us know that you're still looking for a response. Jamila, you want to live and work in the US. As we said earlier, there's a success path. It begins with NCLEX. And so if you're interested in working with Connetics USA, you can go to our website, conneticsUSA.com/apply. And you can submit an application there. And also, be looking into what we're talking about here with NCLEX. Our website has Connetics College videos that talk about what is NCLEX, how does it work, what do you need to do, and so you can learn a lot from those resources as well. And we've posted that link in the comments too, so you can take a look. Rolf is saying that during the exam she prayed for the max questions and cried when it shut off at 75, but she passed. So yes, it is definitely good to prepare for the longer one. And then it's still stressful when it stops. Most people are like, I have no idea. I remember, it's been a while for me, but when it stopped, I walked out, called my mom, who's a nurse, and I cried. I didn't make it. I didn't make it. She's like, oh, honey, you're okay. I had to wait. I had to find out just like everybody else. So during that time, it's agonizing, but it's nice to have people who are there to be your cheerleader too. So let's see, we're going to be closing out in the next few minutes. Sheena, really quick, prior to NextGen, most of what I heard, and maybe what you heard about it, was select all that apply questions were just a nightmare. Everybody would talk about how many they got and how tough it was, and they weren't sure. So now it's partial credit. How did did that make a difference for you, knowing that you could get some points positive for that, or was it still really stressful?
Well, for me, even before, I so hate the SATA questions. But then, this is the NCLEX exam, so I just focus on where I have a low grades in my reviews.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe in that 2 weeks or 3 weeks before, I focus on that SATA questions, like in also in like OB cases, psych.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that's the advice I want to share with to them, that maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks before, just focus on where you have a low grades when you are with Sir Paul reviews.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the last thing is how I think all of you were in the Aspire program. So you had somewhat a study schedule and a structure, because we've talked about that. But ideally, Paul, what's kind of the time that you would recommend for maybe like 3 months, 6 months? What's ideal, especially for a nurse who's currently working in the nursing profession and trying to prepare for the NCLEX?
Right. So the structure of my program is like this. If you devote 15 to 20 hours a week for your review, then you can finish my program in as little as 16 weeks. Now, some students can do much faster than that because they probably have good content already, or they have more time because they're working less hours, then they
Mm-hmm.
can do it faster. But some students could also not commit 15 to 20 hours a week because they're just working too much and there's a lot of nursing shortage where they have to pick up more shifts. Then they could do it in 6 months to 8 months. But ideally, we want you to take the NCLEX 3 to 4 months, because we're not only um, checking your ability to uh, progress or improve your scores, but also your momentum. The longer you stay in a program, the longer the much faster that you lose your momentum. So by the time we check in on you on the 8th or 9th month, then we feel like you're just gonna start again because your momentum is lost at that point. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to ride on that momentum. As soon as the student is on board the program, that excitement, I want to bank on that. until they pass the NCLEX, because that will help them, keep them going and motivate them to keep studying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really important. That and making sure that your NCLEX application is
Right,
staying in line with that timeline.
right.
So it is possible, but it means you have to get those milestones accomplished as well. Submit your documents that are required, both for your credentials evaluation. If you weren't educated in English, you might also have to get some translation of your school documents if they're not in that in English, and then send that. So those things take time, and you kind of want to run that parallel or get a little ahead with your application, and then
Right, right.
be really intense in your review. Don't let the application be the last thing you do. It takes too long, and you'll be extending your study time way more than you need to.
Also avoid CGF in this for now, because as a student that's been waiting for 9 months, it's incredibly frustrating on the nurses end too, because they feel like they're ready to take the NCLEX but they couldn't proceed,
Right.
because CGFNS is severely backlogged. I mean, imagine millions of nurses around the world trying to apply for NCLEX.
Yes. So there are other options
Mm-hmm.
for credentials evaluations that will get you through certain boards faster. And so with those boards, you kind of want to know who will accept those different providers and evaluators. The most common one is Joseph Silney, but there are other companies out there that, depending on that state, may be acceptable.
Right.
So that's something, that's another show that we do, but we won't go into that today. So your program is built for the working nurse. That it
Mhm.
is doable, guys. Some nurses often tell me that right before the exam, they'll take some time off. They'll take some extra leave then right before, but they're not like, I'm not going to work, I'm just going to study, because that's really probably not the best thing for your preparation to come to the US either. You need
Right.
experience to make yourself more marketable. Retrogression. We got 1 minute. Retrogression is here. So unfortunately, that is slowing down the appointments for getting getting an appointment to go and have your consulate interview and then get your visa and move to the US. However, we're still filing. Employers are still sponsoring, and so you need to get your NCLEX done, get a sponsor if you don't already have one. I know some of you do, and get into that filing queue so that you continue through that process. As we showed earlier with the success path, NCLEX is the first step. But if you've already got a sponsor who's just waiting for you to get done with NCLEX, you want to make the most of that job opportunity, because it won't last forever. They won't wait forever for you. They said they liked you. They gave you that offer. They are still going to file, but you have to also be very much engaged in the process. So let's see. Final advice. Carolina, one piece of final advice for our nurses who are watching today.
Do not give up.
I like that. Don't give up. You are the living embodiment of not giving up, and it was worth it. Marcelli, a piece of advice?
You have to have faith in God, but faith without action is dead. So you have to do your part as well. Master all the contents, answer Q&As. Just do not underestimate what God do to help you achieve your dreams step by step, as long as you trust Him.
Yes, there is a lot of resources out there. And so faith and action is very important. Making the most of those resources is what's going to give you the most opportunity to be successful. And Sheena?
For me, do not be afraid to take the NG and NCLEX. Just attend the live classes of Sir Paul. It's really helpful. And then answering questions. Rationales is also important to review all that cases, and then just have faith and always pray.
So, Paul, is there anything you'd like to add to that, or did they sum it up pretty well?
They summed it up pretty well, but I just want to focus on one thing. All right.
Mhm.
Actually, I said the word already. Very important to have focus. So set your goals, focus on it. And when you focus on your goals, everything else will fall into place. So once you know your goals, you're gonna work hard to get that. So NCLEX is just like that. It's just another milestone in your career. So make sure you get 100 focus for the exam, and you're gonna get there.
All right. And I'm going to take the last word and tell you that many of us have a cheerleader or more than one in our lives. And sometimes we're nurses. So we're kind of built to be the cheerleader and the support for a lot of other people. Our Onwards and Upwards shows are meant to inspire you and give you ideas for how you can keep moving forward with this dream and making it a reality. But in the meantime, also look to those cheerleaders around you that sometimes maybe depend on you. And when they ask you, how can I help? Let them know you need some cheerleading. You need some support. You may need for them to give you a little more time to spend in study than what you normally can do. But I find that many times once you reach out and ask, the people around you who support you will rally, and they will be ready to give you that support. So usually I know you're the support system for everybody else. It's kind of in our nature, but they do return the favor a lot of times if you're willing to reach out and ask. So with that, we hope to see you again on future Onwards and Upwards shows. Thank you so much to all of you from around the world who were joining us. I did see a quick pop-up of the schedule that's coming up for some future shows. I wonder if we can get our team to bring that back up for you. And then, yes, there we go. So OET, if you're going to be studying for the OET, we've got some information to share with you about that on June 9th. June 16th, immigration Q&A. The 23rd, we're talking about Southern living, being in the U.S. and living in the South, which is where I currently live. And I think Paul a little bit too. Right. Texas is kind of the South. And then on June 30th, we're going to showcase one of our clients. So we hope you'll join us. In the LaFora Talk Show on June 13th, we'll be back to talk about work-life balance in the U.S. Very important topic, especially when you're transitioning to your life here in the U.S. So we hope you'll join us. Thank you so much to our guests for today. We really appreciate you being on and sharing your stories and your advice with us. And we hope maybe we can do it again soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend.